Hello, everybody. I'm Tyler Sunt, and today I'm going to be reading a chapter of my newly released book, The Evil That Came from the Sky. But first, I'm going to read the back here for you so you get an idea of what it's about. On a violent medieval world plagued by egotism and misogynistic lords and soldiers, a young girl and her brother fall victim to a sinister alien object that comes from the sky and changes their lives forever. As they and a handful of survivors flee to safety from the sinister endeavors of the strange object, their sanity and hearts will be tested to the limit. Will they overcome the apocalyptic events or join the blackness? Is this evil that came from the sky the only terrible obstacle they will encounter on their perilous journey? Is there any hope against such horrifying odds? There's only one way to find out. So now I'm going to read the first chapter. Okay, so Part 1, Morrowind, where it all began. Chapter 1. The sky that loomed over the small village of Morrowind and its neighboring prairie fields had cast a brilliant fluorescent pink hue across the land. In the dry, brown, and weed-stricken fields, two siblings, Tristan, who was 8 years old, and Moon, 10, were playing. As far into the field as they were, Moon, the more mature one of the two, knew it was getting late and the grumpy gate guard would be out looking for them soon. "Tristan," Moon called. Her young voice sounded motherly. "We should be heading back now." Tristan's chocolate-brown hair was in a frizzy state, and his hazel-brown eyes were gazing at the sky. He looked like a scarecrow, staring off in the distance with weed stalks tangled in his hair. Tristan was oblivious to his sister. "Tristan, come," she beckoned. "Huh?" he moaned, still gazing upward. Moon walked up to him, and with her tough little hands she tugged his ragged brown cotton shirt. Without breaking his focus, Tristan tried to swat her away. "What are you looking at?" she asked, looking into his eyes. "The sky. There. You see?" he droned, raising his stubby finger up to the horizon. Moon raised her hand to blot out the sun. She peered for a moment. Then she saw it. A flickering, silver light was beginning to grow as it moved toward them. Suddenly, a thunderous crackling sound shattered the air and made both the children clasp their ears. Moon shrieked in fear while Tristan smiled, holding his ears with his palms under his shaggy hair. The object in the sky became engulfed in flame, leaving a thick black trail of billowing smoke as it roared over top of them. Moon screamed, and Tristan fell onto his butt as he watched the soaring ball of flame blast above him. The heat that it gave off made their eyes water. The ground gave off a light rumble, followed by a gust of hot wind that ruffled Moon's golden curly hair and made her ratty white-stained dress flutter for a moment. Tristan could not contain his excitement and giggled uncontrollably as he picked himself up from the ground, his eyes wide, glazed, and beaming with anxiety. "Wow! That was... Oh boy!" he exclaimed, starting a mad dash for the grounded object just over a hill in front of him. Moon quickly grabbed his rope belt and held him back. "Let me go! I want to see!" he scowled. "No! We must go tell Father and the guardsmen. We must tell everybody," she insisted. Tristan turned around and frowned. He then widened his eyes and glanced over Moon's shoulder. "Look!" he shouted, pointing past her. Moon loosened her grip and turned around quickly. With that, Tristan ripped out of her grip and made a run for the hill to see what was waiting on the other side, giggling hysterically. "No, Tristan! Wait!" she hollered. She watched as he waded through the field, his mop bouncing just over the tips of the weeds, then out of sight over the hill. For a moment, she thought of racing back to the village and telling her father, but realized Tristan would get lost or hurt. Also, the sun was descending quickly, and soon there would no longer be any daylight, making it impossible to find anything, especially a stubborn 8-year-old boy. She decided to go after him, grunting in frustration. Why did he not just listen, she thought. She ran over the top of the thick, weed-infested hill and started to make her way down, pushing aside the tall weeds. She jumped up and down, looking for her brother as she made her way down. As she came to an opening, she could see the valley running between the two hills and a monstrous crater with plumes of black smoke rising from it. Her brother was standing near the object with a long stick in his hand. Moon kept running for him, for she saw that there were black scorch marks surrounding the thing, and flames began to rise in a half circle around it. If she didn't hurry, Tristan would become trapped in its fiery ring. The weeds were so dry that the heat the thing was giving off was making them burst into flames. She managed to get to him in time. Curiosity consumed her, and she looked at the object, which was now in plain sight. It was black, bubbling, and tar-like, and smelled of rot and decay. There were bubbles swelling all over it. Some of the bubbles popped, releasing more of the unbearable stench. "Wow," Tristan whispered in admiration, poking the massive ball of tar with his stick. "It stinks," Moon said, plugging her nose. Tristan had to use 2 hands to pull the stick out of the black mass of goop. "Sticky," Tristan said, placing the end of the stick over the thin shell of one of the larger bubbles. "We shouldn't be here." "We should tell Father," Moon suggested, taking Tristan's arm without breaking her gaze on the tarball. "Why?" Tristan asked, shrugging her off. Moon let out a long, frustrated sigh and placed her hands on her hips and rolled her sparkly blue eyes. "What if it's dangerous? Look, it's burning the grass around us," she said. "It's not dangerous. It's just a big pile of poo," Tristan answered, laughing at his poo joke. He poked the bubble. When it popped, scalding hot liquid splattered over young Tristan's face, and a few drops of it went into both of his eyes. A sickly, sizzling sound came from the hot substance on his face, and it burned like acid through his soft flesh. Tristan dropped his stick and wrapped his hands around his face and immediately began screaming. It was a pain unlike anything he had ever had the misfortune of enduring. Moon jumped back in shock and watched as her little brother frantically clawed at his eyes, trying desperately to peel the black substance from them. He was too late, however, for the black sludge had melted his eyes into white jelly inside of his sockets. After only mere seconds, his screams turned to a light moan as the pain became too unbearable for him. He fell on his back, lifeless. Moon cupped her mouth in terror, shock, and sadness, and tears began to stream down her rosy cheeks. Her brother's face was no longer recognizable, and his eye sockets were now black, gaping holes, displaying pinkish-red brain matter where white steam rose out of them. His skin continued to sizzle like raw meat on a hot pan. She did not know what to do. She was alone, and it was nearly dark now, and the flames from the airborne object blasting out of the large blob were encircling her and Tristan. Her throat swelled in pain as she sobbed, holding her brother in her arms. She did not even remember now how to get home, for this was the farthest they had ever wandered away from their village. If only, she thought, she had kept better track of where she was when she followed him here. She tried to lift him to move him away from the growing flames, but did not have the strength. Her sobs became stronger, making her strength weaken. She would not abandon Tristan. Yellow pus now began to foam out of his once soft, pudgy face. "Tristan," she whimpered, patting his messy hair, "please wake up. I'm so scared." She wiped her snotty nose and watery eyes with the back of her arm and pulled his head into her chest. "Children? Moon? Tristan!" a voice echoed from the distance over the roaring fires. She recognized the voice, and hope took hold of her. It was the gate guard, Dragomir. He was the one who warned them not to wander off too far when they began playing earlier. She immediately let Tristan down softly, then rose to her bare feet and started to run toward the voice. When she finally got to the top of the hill, she saw him, with his red cape flapping in the wind like a flag. "Help!" Moon screamed. The guard turned his head toward her and took notice. He quickly ran to her. "What are you doing so far out here, young lady?" he asked. "Please, sir," she sobbed. "What is it? What has happened? And where's your younger brother?" She pointed at the bottom of the hill. "He's there." "Okay, stay close to me and watch for wolves," he ordered. Moon grabbed the bottom corner of his soft cape and ran with him. The guardsman approached the boy, full of shock as he looked at the fire that was burning around him. Carefully, he knelt beside Tristan. "My goodness," he muttered. His stubble-covered jaw dropped at what he saw. "What's happened?" Moon pointed at the black tar ball that grumbled, smoldered, and pulsated. She was sobbing as she held on tightly to his cape with one hand and her chest in the other. "What in the king's name is this?" he wondered out loud. "It came from the sky," Moon stammered, "and it did this to Tristan." "Stay away from it." The guardsman moved in closer to Tristan, but had stopped because Moon was holding him too tightly. "You must be calm, child. May I take your brother back to the village?" he asked calmly. Moon hesitated, then let go, and he undid the tied leather flap from around his thigh strap and unsheathed the dagger, which glimmered in the firelight. The sun was absent now. His blade seamlessly seared a perfect cut through his thick cotton cape, which he then used to make a wrapping bandage. He slid it back into the pouch. Moon took hold of the guardsman again and watched his actions over his shoulder. The guard gently raised Tristan's head and cautiously wrapped the cloth around his face, covering his eyes. "There, your brother will be just fine, I'm sure. You're both from a very strong family, he said. He placed his ear over Tristan's mouth and placed his hand on his chest. The child's heart was racing, but the breaths were short. Dragomir had fought enough battles and pulled aside enough wounded men who were as close to death's abyss as the poor young boy was now. Time would not wait for him. "Can you run fast, kid?" he asked Moon. She nodded nervously and wiped her tears and snot on his cape. "Good. Let's go." And that was chapter 1 of The Evil That Came from the Sky. So I guess you kind of get an idea of what it's going to kind of be like. It kind of hits the ground running in the first chapter. So it's a pretty fast-paced book. You can expect a lot of heartbreak, some pretty funny moments, I think, in there too. Some good characters. There's going to be some violence for sure in this. So it's basically set in a medieval fantasy world, and this object obviously comes down, and there's a lot to it, a lot more than what you just read. Like, obviously something bigger is happening here. So I don't want to give any spoilers away or anything, but if that's something that piques your interest, be sure to go visit Amazon.ca or .com or wherever you're from, the Amazon that sells stuff to you. You can find the paperback version there. It's $15.99, and if you have a Kindle or an ebook, you can get the digital version for $2. So I really appreciate your time. Thank you for listening, and I really appreciate the support that I've gotten so far from everybody, and I can't wait to hear what you think. So pick up your copy today. Thank you.